Hello! Today we are making thank you cards using
scraps. So here's just some random scraps from my scrap pile. And I just started kind of putting things together using the back sides of things. You can see that I just flipped it over and I'm like, oh yeah, that works good together. We'll just stick it together. So it's not rocket science for sure. It's just kind of figuring out what I like together and the placement, and I just wanted to use up as many scraps as possible. So I just used some scrappy tape. I used 1/4 inch and then the 1 inch scrappy tape, and I trimmed off my edges. A lot of the scraps I'm using I have had forever. It feels like a lot of them are from SEI, from when I worked there clear back in 09. So they are really old. I don't even know if you could find some of these papers anymore, sorry. And a lot of them are double-sided. One fun thing about just using scraps is trying to figure out different ways to do layouts with similar size pieces of paper. I end up with lots of scraps just from different projects, and so it's fun to try and utilize them in a different way. Here I'm using the scraps left over after making my shaker cards and using the border punches. I'm also using the leftover scraps from the big leaves from that same project, and this one just wasn't wide enough, so I lined up the top with my card so all of the leaves and acorns would be covered by this orange polka dot paper, and that way no one can tell it doesn't go all the way to the top, but I was able to use both scraps from the project. Once I laid it down, I just trimmed off the edge, and then I realized that I didn't put anything on the edge of the paper, so I just got my glue, my Tombow glue, and a toothpick, and I just put a little bit of glue on my toothpick, and then I'd put a little bit on the edge. So just because you mess up a card does not mean that you have to toss it or peel everything off. And then I just used the back end to kind of flatten it out and it turned out good. So this one I just did the same thing. I did, however, forget what side of my green paper was too long. So when I put these orange pieces on, I hung the wrong side off of the side of the paper. So once I got it on there, I realized it was wrong, so I had to cut off both sides. So if I had been paying attention, I would have just done the one side. This time, I was better about putting the glue on, and I still had glue left, so I just figured, I'll use a toothpick and just put it on with a toothpick and use up what I had squirted onto this piece of paper. So even though I'm using the same paper combinations, I didn't want the cards to look the same. So I just moved it down a little bit, trying to decide how I would fit my stamps on and make sure I had enough space for that. On this one, I'm wishing I would have done the glue just so I could have readjusted things once I actually got them on the paper. I was just kind of racing the clock at this point. It was bedtime for my kids, so I was just trying to get it done while I was thinking about it and had the time, and I just didn't lay it out as well as I wanted to. So there were more gaps in some places than others. I'm not gonna lie, after doing the other cards, I really loved the simplicity of this just one extra piece of paper on here. This one was really fun to do. I love diagonal pieces, and so it was fun to just use the same piece of paper and just flip it over and be able to get a fun, simple pattern out of it. The nice thing about having all these pieces long and hanging over is that I can just trim them off and I don't have to be worried about anything being too short. These are the stamps I'm using today. They are from Avriel. And I'm not going to show you all the stamping of all the cards, but I did stamp with the Versamark ink, and then I heat embossed with my Nuvo heat emboss powder, and I did use the Lawn Fawn white heat embossing powder as well. I really love watching it change from the powder into the embossed. It just is so shiny, and I love the texture of it. So this one, it didn't go on as it should have in some places. I just didn't get enough ink. So the nice thing with these stamps is I could just put them back on in the right place and stamp them again, cover it with my embossing powder, and then heat set it again. I really love that I learned this from watching Jennifer Maguire do it on one of her videos. And then I don't have to have everything perfect every time. If something doesn't come on right, then I can just heat emboss again. Like on this, because my thanks was a little bit wider than my striped paper, you can see my S is off and then my T is off. And because of that, my S didn't stamp all the way. So I can just put it back in, re-stamp it, and then re-powder and heat set it. And it turned out great. I also love that you can heat emboss on top of other heat emboss to make it thicker and stand out more. The reason that I didn't stamp all of them at the same time is I want each thanks to be a different color. So the bottom one was white, this one is blue, and I wanted this one to be thicker as well because I made the white one thicker. So I did that one again. And then I'll do the last one with the silver heat emboss. As a side note, just make sure your heat gun is nice and hot when you put it over your paper, because you don't want to have to stay in one spot for very long. It can warp your paper. So here I lined things up. You can kind of see on my paper that I didn't clean my stamps very good, but thankfully they were all where they were supposed to be. And these ones I wanted to do all the same color, so it was easy to just stamp them all and heat emboss them all at the same time. These ones I am not stamping directly onto the cards, so I'm just placing in my white cardstock, and because of the size, I wasn't able to put the magnets on. So I had to be pretty careful about where everything got placed. On this one, I was gonna try and heat emboss on white cardstock and then put it over the blue plaid, but these are just too big of stamps compared to the blue plaid, so it was just easier to actually stamp it on the card. So this one, for some reason, my Versamark ink didn't stick very well the first go round, so I redid it, and then watch, I'll put my thumb in it right there. And so I just heated it again, and it flattened out perfectly. So that's the other nice thing about heat embossing, is if you stick your fingers in it, just heat it up again and it smooths out. So these ones I just glued on so it was easier to place them, and then I put something heavy on top of them and waited for them to dry. So here's the finished product of all of them. I hope you enjoyed watching me use up all my old scraps, and hopefully it'll inspire you to use your old scraps. And you don't have to do every card the same. I love that these turned out so different, even though I used some of the same papers. So here is that Avriel Thanks stamp set. These are the Nuvo embossing powders that I used, and the Versamark ink, the Lawn Fawn white embossing powder, and the Ranger static pouch. And here's our finished product. Thanks for watching.